Hello, I'm Dr. Katherine Horton. This is the fifth part of a little series I'm doing about essentially the global pivot out of the empire of bullshit. I refer you to the previous episodes where I describe in detail, find the links below this video about what I term the empire of bullshit and what this global pivot is about. In the previous session I started talking about how to do the transition, and because it's quite involved I split it over several videos. So here now we continue. The last episode was about how to restore the victim's finances, very, very important, because part of this, the takedown program of the intelligence agencies is to destroy victims' finances like that. The other part is to destroy their reputation, to smear them with mental health issues and so on, so that the intelligence agencies can essentially do whatever they like with you, which as we now know is essentially maiming and murdering you at will. As sick as that sounds, this is what the data seems to show. So now, the first one was about restoring the finances and then restoring the reputation. These are the 2 points of attack about you. And also with your reputation is also incorporated another line of attack, which is essentially towards your family. They try to snip your social links. So hopefully when you have actual evidence and you can point to a community of high-profile whistleblowers, I'm not just talking about myself at all, there are very, very whistleblowers, high-profile whistleblowers out there who you can refer to who are investigating this and who are targeted themselves. So we now are all coming forward, and we're coming forward as one big front. So if you feel insecure or you feel like your family doesn't believe you, I have made these videos public and I am entirely open and transparent about what's happening to me, because I want you to be comfortable, to feel comfortable coming forward. I know that there are other problems. For example, I myself at the end of October 2016 was trying to go public. This was, to go to the police and report a brutal physical assault on me at night in a hotel room. And then the UK police tried to smear me with mental health and actually launched just before midnight an entire elaborate intimidation theatre that in my view only MI5 could have really instigated and pulled off like that. The entire episode didn't make a shred of sense. I have posted the video online since then. I think I called it MI5 Crimes Part 4, and you can actually see the police officers there. And I insist that these things have to stay public because this is what has been done. So you can see it for yourself, how they act, but we do not cower, because this whole, what I did then is I published, before I asked the police officers, and I said I'm going to film the entire interaction. I was inside my own private, my private quarters as in my hotel room at the time, and they said yes, it's fine, we're filming too. So they had their body cams, I had my camera placed on the side and I was filming the interaction, so that's okay. And because these are public servants and this is public interest, I published it now. I also would like to draw your attention to the fact that I think the police officers at the scene acted correctly. As far as I could tell, there was nothing that I found objectionable. What I did find objectionable was the fact that this entire scene was even launched from their headquarters to start with. But I think the people at the scene, most of them, certainly the senior police officers with their body gear, were entirely oblivious to what actually is, the bigger picture here. So that's what we do. We do not get cowed, we move forward. And then the other thing I also did is request my crime report, which Greater Manchester Police to this day has refused to actually give it to me. Maybe they just need longer. Probably they have to, I would almost allege that they are making stuff up, and they now probably turning to the BBC, TV series script writers to come up with a good story of how to explain what actually happened. But as it stands, I still haven't received my crime report, even though I requested it. But anyway, maybe they need to be given more time. So, and now I'm going to make everything public on what we're going to do to help the victims, because 2017 has to be the year when this comes to a stop. We have crimes against humanity, we've got public mutilations, we've got public executions, people have their eye, their heart, their brain, their internal organs damaged, essentially live on camera now, and the intelligence agencies are so utterly degenerate and so infested with rampant criminality and utter, boundless, human life disregarding arrogance that they can't bring themselves to stop it, even though it's bleeding obvious that they are the culprits, and probably their contractors, but they are in charge of fighting terrorism. Instead, they covered it up, they perpetrated it themselves, and now we're going after them. So The first part was about restoring victims' finances and their reputation. And we're going to do that, and we're going to do everything, I should also say everything at the same time. Okay, so it's not just like first we have to finish this process and then we move on to the next. No, this will be a decentralized, what I propose is a decentralized program of coming online. And I want it to be decentralized across countries, regions, languages, everything. We all work together in progress, right? With our progress, we help each other, but without having actually solid links. And you know why? Because if we try to have solid links, they try to break us apart. They'll try to interfere with our websites, our communication, and so on. So everyone should broadcast out to the broadest audience possible, because this is how you recruit people from everywhere around you, and it's very, very hard to sabotage. They can, of course, try to make your YouTube videos disappear, but I am going to make cross-checks, and I'm going to spread on different platforms all the videos that I'm making. So the last one was just about the victims, but now how we're going to recapture the system. So this is now about recapturing the system. And I would like also in this video to reply to Ani Kaspar, who made an excellent video, and I watched it, and I think she has got excellent points, and I shall link it. Because I'm also kind of, what we're doing is I'm broadcasting publicly and I reply to her publicly, and I really liked her public statement, because then other people can make up their mind about what do they think about our suggestions. Do they want to contribute? Do they want to go off on a branch, try something else themselves? But we'll keep each other posted essentially publicly, and I think that's the best way, because there's a huge invisible army of people who are not broadcasting publicly, but they are there to help us. And they are helping us, and we need to keep them updated, and we will keep this public conversation going. So, wherever you are in the world, you can listen to Annie, you can listen to my videos. I'm going to have a conversation with Annie, essentially, because it's so productive, and you can join us at any point. You know, you can also log off at any point. You don't have to be with us throughout the time. You contribute at the level that you're comfortable with. So, or not at all, as you like. So, Annie, I really liked talking about how to recapture a captured system. I really liked your suggestion of a hit list. And I love the name. We will have a hit list. And this is essentially, and what Annie said is, we're not going to harm anybody or kill anybody. This is not what it is. This is essentially to whom we're going to address our pleas and our, essentially our compassion and our information and so on about these cases. And these are the people we will ask to help us, because they have a public duty to assist us. And drawing up a hit list, I think, is fantastic. And essentially, as I understood Annie, she was saying we're going to not just draw up a hit list, we're also going to essentially reach as high as we can. We'll do that. And I think the way she also meant it, and the way I understood it, is that we not just have, the top, like, the President of the United States, or, just presidents of different countries, but we're going to have an entire, list. So people at the bottom, people in the middle, people at the top, and so on, but we will have a hit list. And, we can have a public hit list. In that sense, those are the people who we're going to address. Those are the people who we're going to target now, but in a positive way, with our pleas and so on, with our requests for help. And then we're going to move from there. And I really love that idea, because I think this is exactly what we should do. So I think to start with the recapture, we should, first of all, victims, but also others. Hang on, I always have to check what you can see. Yeah, you can still see that. So we've got people who are victims themselves and people who would like to assist. And I think both of them, we should start off with a hit list. And this hit list would be the people who would like to contact. So for example, if you are an individual victim, your hit list would, for example, comprise a certain police officer. Let's say this is the police. And then, you try to target this person. Or maybe you're even lucky and you get through to a police officer who actually helps you. So, let's say this is the police. So you're targeting a police officer here. And your hit list will be maybe, a local police. Say, I'm just playing it through. And then, maybe also a doctor who would like to inform about it. you know, you want to have a doctor who you want to have on your case, say, you know, like here. But you can also aim higher. You can also say, well, there's, you know, somebody from a certain charity running a charity, you know, people on the ground are really helpful, but I would like to address the head of a charity here, right? And I want this entire charity to help me. So this could also be, you know, police, doctors, charities. Or maybe you also want to aim higher and you would like to address, if, you know, say these are the psychiatrists and none of them know about voice to skull and these sort of attacks, then you can maybe also address, you know, the psychiatric association and give them information about these crimes, because they have to be brought up to date as well. So maybe, you know, how would you call it, professional bodies maybe, you know, professional. And this is just an example here, by the way. This is not the hit list, because Annie did have a hit list that she proposed. And today I'm just talking in the most general terms. So I'm not modifying anything Annie said. I'm not, you know, I'm not approaching the content. I think, you know, hers is a standalone, very valuable idea. And, you know, should be listened to it standalone. I'm just generalizing it for other victims. So the hit list essentially is your points of attack that you would like to start with. Like, who would you like to start with, you know, and so on and so on. And maybe you want to also address, I mean, on my hit list, for example, I had the German ambassador, because I live in Switzerland as a German citizen, and I'm now being attacked here with a type of attack that quite publicly started in Germany. So I know German intelligence is involved, and I'm still blaming them, as well as British intelligence, because that's where my targeting started. So, you know, on my hit list, I also publicly, I would recommend everybody that your hit list contains the heads of intelligence of your country, because they are the ones doing it. You know, or if you live in a country and your targeting started somewhere else, it is the heads of intelligence of the countries where you were affected significantly. So I would put very importantly, you know, head of Secret Service. As, you know, as far as I'm concerned, these people need to have essentially an administrative crosshair, you know, on their forehead until this stops. So we make a hit list, and then the question is, how do you go about recapturing a system? Because maybe you approach your local police officer here and he just rejects you and tries to section you, you know, say. But then, as I said, I made a video about recapturing an organization. What you have to keep in mind, and what I said at the time, is that if you approach your local police, you don't do it alone, okay? If, you know, you want to approach them, you either have literally a group of people around you. So first of all, maybe your hit list will start off with family members. You convince them first by showing them these videos, by telling them that there's now an international, global effort to stop these crimes. Get your family to listen to, and get your family to go along with you to the police station, or have a friend who trusts you, or try to be in a group. So with the police, you know, in particular, what I would recommend is the following, and I would actually have specific recommendations for victims. So in the case of the police, keep the following in mind. First, don't go alone if you can help it, right? Find someone who you trust. Second, carry a dictaphone. Ideally carry two, you know, literally, but basically record the conversation. And this trick about carrying two dictaphones is, I think, in this case crucial, because we're dealing with deep corruption and unfathomable criminality. So a little bit of, you know, given how much cheating we're exposed to in criminality, this is okay what I'm going to suggest to you. In the public, it is actually in the public interest. My dictaphone costs me about 15 euros or something. And, you know, just try it out, make sure that you can record stuff. I just had it in my handbag. I recorded my appearance at the police station. And there I said, I just had my phone as priming. I actually had a separate dictaphone. And I just said, excuse me, I had my phone open, and I said, excuse me, is it okay if I record this conversation? And the dictaphone was running all along anyway. And he said, no, you can't. And I was like, okay. And I put down my phone. Meanwhile, I continued recording. And thank goodness I did, because Now I've got evidence of what exactly I said to the police officer. And there's absolutely nothing in that that could have possibly triggered this mental health shenanigans that was then pulled off at midnight several hours later. And because of this criminality, because of the cover-up, we know now exists in the police, and I've seen it myself, covertly record it. You can't just go to a police station and be searched, so have it in your handbag, have it in your jacket or somewhere. Make sure the audio is good enough if you record people like that. But when you go to the police, record the entire event. And I suggest 2 dictaphones, because if you don't have a phone on you, you can also put a dictaphone down and say, is it okay if I record it? And most likely if they're corrupt, they are going to say no. And then you're going to record it anyway with the other one. Even if they confiscate the ones that you put there essentially as a trap, as a red herring, because that was what my phone was. It was a red herring. I said, can I record it? And immediately I primed him to think I'm going to record it with my phone. And when he said no, I put my phone away, thinking, yeah, let's see, it's going to be some bullshit, isn't it? But the point is, because we're dealing with police corruption, it is your right, essentially, to ensure that you are not being essentially, subverted by a higher power. So record what you're saying. That's point number 1. Covertly record so that you can prove what happened. At the end of the day, these people are public servants. You're in a public place, and these are about high crimes, so you're entirely within your right, in my view. Then if you can use it in court or not, that's a different matter. But should someone attack you, you've got evidence, right? So that's it. And even if it can't be used in court today, sometimes courts change their mind when they actually see the staggering amount of criminality, so don't despair about that. So number 3 also, anything you hand in, you only hand in as a copy. And you make backup copies of everything you hand in. And you keep them, ideally several, and you keep them in a safe place. Keep them in a safe place. If you put it in a bank safe, photograph what you put in the bank safe. And then have the photo multiplied and, spread it around so that there are different hooks. If one bit is compromised, you've got different tentacles on it. You can either prove that something has been modified, maybe something got stolen from your bank safe. I mean, even that in principle is possible, because the police can request access to your bank safe. But then you might have a photograph on your phone, a photograph somewhere in an online cloud about what you put into the bank safe. So, spread it around a bit and have little hideouts for these things and duplicate. But the most important thing is keep copies and diaries. Okay? And number 4, after you've been there, request your crime report. So request essentially to see what they have on you as well. Now I went to this, I had to go alone because I was alone in the UK at the time, but I did do the covert recording. I didn't give them copies of anything because, it wasn't a case like that. But then when I requested my crime report, now they still haven't, produced it. Greater Manchester's still sitting on it. So, and already, if they don't give you the crime report, by the way, when you request it, do it in writing and keep a copy of the letter. And if you send the letter, send it as registered post. And check online that it has arrived. And when it has arrived, take a screenshot proving it has arrived and keep it with the receipt that you've posted it. So keep absolutely evidence about everything to do with them. Because essentially you have to prove crimes that they are committing. So you have to be like a super inspector. You have to be like, I don't know, Sherlock Holmes or Miss Marple or Hercule Poirot or, Inspector Clouseau. Pick your favorite detective and think about what would they do. So that's about the police. Now with doctors, I would almost recommend the same. Covertly record what they say to you, especially if your doctors are doing, something that you might find malpractice. Then also request always to have a copy of your results, always. Keep a copy and duplicate that copy as well. Spread it around into safe places. And essentially keep a tab on your doctors as well so that you can prove everything. So, and that's the one thing about approaching. And you're going to do the same thing essentially, the same cycle with whatever organization you're approaching. And this is about the hit list. So we're approaching now charities and, heads of intelligence and so on and so on. And ideally you don't go alone. If you can help it, you don't go alone. You record every conversation covertly it doesn't matter what the law says. For your private use, you can record it, and for your private protection, most certainly, and they record everything we say. Keep copies and then request reports, crime reports, doctors' reports. And if you're dealing with official organizations, request an FOI. You know, as soon as you go, I think you can request FOI as freedom of information. In those countries where you have freedom of information, you know, make it a habit that you go, you submit information to this, and then, you know, you immediately send an FOI request and you say how, you know, let's say you report microwave assaults, send an FOI straight away asking how many microwave assault reports did your institution receive in total, say over the last 5 years or something. Because if you've submitted one, there should be at least one. If it comes back with none, you know, the person dealing with FOI might be separate from the one handling your case, and allow enough time to actually, for this to percolate, you know, through the system. Then you know, hang on, there's serious cover-up. So essentially, try to have as many hooks on the system as you can and get information. So work with them, but keep them essentially in a headlock. You know, so whatever you tell them, you ask for a copy back. You know, you want to hear what they did. So this is what how I would approach these. But then also remember my video from the recapturing organizations. The link is below. In the recapture, if you approach, let's say these are not family members, let's say you went alone, you know, no one can join you on the day, or let's say you went with your entire family members, but they still rejected you, we don't stop there. The next person comes along. Find another victim in your region. If there's nobody in your locality, right, in the actual local area, get somebody else who knows about your case to call the police station separately. This is also, you don't have to physically go somewhere to essentially, you know, keep approaching the same person. What is also highly effective is maybe if somebody calls the police station at another, you were turned away, but your case is still on the file. Well, if you're turned away, a day later, make somebody else call the police station, say another victim, and say to the police officer, did you know that these crimes are happening? I have heard that the victim approached you. What are you going to do about these crimes? That's almost like someone else approaching them, right? That puts, again, pressure. If they get turned away and they say, sorry, you can't say anything about the case, you say, okay, I just wanted to inform you that these microwave attacks are happening. Bye. And then the next day you get somebody else to do the same thing, or the next week. And the range for this, if you are targeting somebody on the hit list, even if you're alone, don't be alone overall. Prepare to have an amplification effect. If they turn you away, prepare to have essentially ammunition in the background to launch at them again, so that they literally have to keep bouncing people off. And by the time they had to bounce 2 people off, it's already much more powerful. You had an effect on them. You know, this person seriously starts thinking, hang on, why does my boss not allow me to deal with this? And they get very uncertain, you know, but you keep throwing stuff at them. And that's what you have to do, because ultimately you have to increase the pressure from this side towards essentially recapture, towards them becoming honest. This pressure has to be higher than the pressure from above, keeping a lid on this, keeping them in the cover-up. So to recapture this person, the pressure you apply by people keep going back and back and back has to be larger than this guy's meeting with his boss and his boss saying, no, we're still not dealing with that. Okay, so that is the plan. You have to understand that. That's what I mean with don't go alone. Even if you go alone, have an amplification effect. Okay, so that is very important. So hit list. So I'm going to wipe this so that I've got more space. But write this down. You know, I'll go back in the video. So approach the hit list. So number 1 was essentially the hit list. And then number 2, approach to have an amplification effect. Amplify. Amplify you approaching the hit list. And this can be done by victims and also others externally. In a sense, if you go and talk to a local police and they turn you away, there's nothing stopping me from calling them from Switzerland. Even if you're in the US, and I say, oh, by the way, did you know it's an international problem? And then I can just say something. I can say, well, here in Switzerland, we're now really ramping up the dealing with it. I think you should do the same in the US. And by the way, I know that in the UK, people are doing the same thing. So what are you going to do in the US? You know, and suddenly if someone else calls in, you have this massive amplification effect. And literally, typically, if say, you know, imagine your local police chief in somewhere in the US, you know, he just probably doesn't think further than his own state, right? If suddenly he gets an international call saying, so I've heard you turned the victim away, what are you going to do about it? This is, you know, international importance, international investigations, how come are you still covering up? People literally shit themselves, typically. Because you suddenly think, oh my God, the entire world is watching. And by the way, this is exactly the effect that Amnesty International used, because the lawyer who first came up with the idea, the original idea of Amnesty International, who started Amnesty, he said, so the idea was someone was in prison, you know, in an unjust fashion, and then you had to get the person out. And he said, it's much more effective if people from other countries write in to that country where this guy's in prison. They would typically target like heads, like prison heads and so on. And he said if other people from other countries start writing in, pleading for this guy, the head of a prison, say, would feel like the entire world is watching. So that has this huge, huge impact psychologically on people. And it shouldn't be underestimated, because even though Amnesty's processes were public, and people knew that this was what's happening, still when the letters start coming in and one prison head suddenly just sees, yes, literally, this extends from Japan all the way to the US, you know, to Latin America. People know about it, you know, everybody gets extremely uncertain. And then prisoners were actually freed. So this is the idea, but the idea behind Amnesty, but the same applies here as well. You can use this amplification effect, you know, so amplify using other people, you know, other people in other countries as well. Other countries, and I will say other contacts. Okay, so that's the way to do it. And then, once you're finished with this guy, you go one level up, and then you start targeting this person. You can send emails, you know, you don't have to go into the organization. This is representing you descending down on his boss, you know, all the way until this boss finally gives in and essentially is recaptured, and then you move off. And this person does whatever you want them to do, you know, either record your crime report or do something for you, and so on and so on. And this is how bit by bit you turn people back to the rule of law. You essentially force them to work in a way that you would expect from the system. If you go to the police and you report a serious assault, you expect to be taken seriously. If they don't take you seriously, you have to work on them until they take you seriously. And you just start clawing back the system. And essentially what you're doing is restoring it to health. It's a process of recapture. So, hit lists, don't go alone. Then the other thing is also, keep going back, you know. So even if this phase doesn't work, keep going back. Even if it's after a year. And then say, oh, I was here a year ago, it's still no better. If it was last week, last month, whenever it was, keep going back. And repeat the process. If this doesn't work the first time around, keep going back, and then refer to your previous stays there. Because, for example, Ani Kaspar, she said, she listed a lot of things she did over the last couple of years when she started being targeted. And then she said, you know, first of all, that it didn't work. And then I would say, okay, Ani, now we go back. We do exactly what you did, you know, then, and we do it again. And now I'm doing it with you. I'm going to call literally every single place that you called from Switzerland, and I'm going to do it now with you. We're going to do the same thing again. You can send the same emails, the same documents. We're going to do it again, and now I'm going to add my voice. So I'm going to amplify what you did. We're going to have a rerun. We're going to amplify. Sorry, I should say also, if the amplify doesn't, you know, work, we're going to have a retry, and I'm going to amplify it, you know, as another voice from another country. And then she also said that when she approached certain charities and so on, some of them admitted they knew about it, and they said, they told me, so Annie said, they told me, we just have to live through it, there's nothing we can do. And to that I would answer, we have to live through it? What has the world come to? Bullshit. We don't have to anything, especially not when it's about crime. So then we go back to exactly this person who said that, and we're going to work them. We're going to work them until they change their mind, because essentially this is classic. Well, it's the tactic of inert people, but it's also the tactic of corrupted systems, you know. They essentially, if you're here, or even if you're here, you're kind of stuck between, you know, corrupt people, what if you're approached from outside and people start, you're on a hit list and people start descending down on you, what you want to say to them is go away, it's just that way and it will always be like that and there's nothing we can do. Just so that they don't have to go about, up against, maybe even scarier people above them. But this is not what we stand for as society. Telling a victim, oh yeah, someone just comes into your home every day and just punches you in the stomach whilst you're sleeping in your bed. And they do it like not just every night, they do it literally every 5 minutes. And you go to the police and they just say, sorry, you just have to live through that. No, I don't frickin' think so. I think you, officer, are gonna get on the case, and if you don't, it means you're not doing your job, so you should quit that job, or you should be quit from that job. That's what it means. So we're going back, and none of this like, oh, you just have to deal with it. Yeah, we had decades of that, and people dealt with it, and the problem just got worse and worse. Now, not just thousands, but by the sound of it, hundreds of thousands of people were targeted by essentially abject scum. Like by the dumbest people, we're gonna be, mucked around by the dumbest people in society? I don't think so. I think I spent far too much time in my life working really hard to then just be essentially messed around by a bunch of like drug dealers and teenage kids. I don't think so. So we're gonna go back, and do not be fobbed off with, oh, can't be done. By the way, this is actually very important as well. To listen carefully what they tell you, trying to intimidate you, and build up defenses against them. Because what we're going to do here is when we're retrying, with the retry, there has to be like in between the amplify. Actually, I should make this point 4, if you forgive me, because I left out one step. Because when you try, this is like, okay, you're approaching the hit list, you amplify it with other voices, and then number 3, so number 4 should be retry, but number 3 should be a learning process. So essentially this is like study and map the system. And sorry, I'm not sure if you can read my handwriting, this is meant to read study and map. Study their practices and map out the system. So if somebody rejects you, you approach them here, and they reject you, study with what precise mechanism they're fobbing you off. Study the mechanism, because then when you go to the retry, you have already seen it before, and then you have something to counter that. If you go and they fob you off with mental health, or it must be mental health, okay, then somebody else comes back, and by the time they come back, by the time you reach the retry, you studied and you know that's what they're going to say, and then this person goes there with literally the statistics. 70% of the victims are women. Mental health, so schizophrenia and paranoia, are 60% men. So 70% women, 60% men. Doesn't match. This explanation is out. Bye. Now you have to do something. So you go back, and by the time you've got the retry, you have mapped their methods. And the reason why this is really important, this studying, is because as you're going through this with the retry, what I want us to do is also build up essentially a protocol, So even you retry, if it was successful, great. Even if it hasn't been successful, what you feed into is essentially build a protocol. Can you read this? Build a protocol, and the protocol is the procedure. A protocol to follow when someone else, even if you get rejected, if someone else comes along, what's the protocol to follow? And the protocol, for example, would be step number 1 that they're going to do with you, and you will have a list, your past wisdom passed on to the next person. And you can write it up in Word or something and have a PDF document where you give advice to the next person coming along. That's your protocol. So the protocol to approach the police is you do this, like what I just said, don't go alone, take a dictaphone, record everything, just only give them copies, blah, blah, blah. And then the next step is the learning that you also put in, and it's things like, the first thing they will say to you is that you have mental health issues. And then the protocol is that to that we reply, no, that explanation is out, and now they really have to get going. And then you can also have the references. You say, our protocol is to give them these references to medical literature, which by the way, you can find on Wikipedia about the rates of schizophrenia, and paranoia. If you're a female victim, that's like a, you know, total dead in the water argument. But even if you're a male victim, you can say, well, what I'm reporting falls into a category where most of the people reporting it are 70% female. My profile matches that, not that of schizophrenia and paranoia. Plus, I also have this really technical, documentation as well. And then we're going to put in technical documentation as well. So the idea is to reach at the end, by the 5th step, a protocol which you then pass on to somebody else. I'll try to write cleaner. Essentially, pass it on to somebody else. And then let's say you worked on your police department, say in your state, and somewhere nearby you know about another victim who's still fighting another captured police department. And then if you're finished here and you recaptured your police department and your case is now on the file, and maybe they're helping you or maybe they admit that they're clueless, but at least they have your file recorded. You join another victim and you help them. You essentially help them in this process of going back. And sometimes you don't even have to travel to their state and go to the police station with them. You can do what I just said. Essentially, if this person gets turned away, you, from your state, make a phone call to that police officer saying, by the way, we in our state, we had the same problem. I'm also a victim, or maybe I'm an expert witness, whatever. What are you going to do about it? And then you essentially start pestering, you start essentially pinging the system, you start prodding the system, and you have to keep prodding it to apply enough pressure so that this guy eventually, one day, also flips back. And I know this process sounds very, very laborious, but honestly, trust me, it's not like that. It's really not as laborious as you think. Because by the time you worked on, let's say you work on this, you had a little success, and then the two of you start working on the police chief, eventually he might even hear from other police chiefs or might have heard something. He will flip quicker, and then by the time he flips, this person will also essentially stop being part of the cover-up. So actually, the more people you claw back into integrity and rule of law, the easier it will be. And essentially, once you have gone through this and you have literally heard all the nonsense that they try to throw at you, you have seen it all, you can prepare the next person will have an easier time, and it just goes from there. It is essentially like getting, like a steam engine going. The first bit until it gets going is very hard, and then once it's building up steam, it's essentially running under its own steam, and it's getting faster and faster, and it's easier to make it go faster beyond that point. So that's what I would recommend in how to approach hit lists, how to actually recapture the system. I also, the other thing is, yes, also the same thing applies to everything. I want to say two things. Sorry, I've got a long list of things, points I wanted to make. The one thing you have to remember is that don't get frustrated if you suddenly approach like a corrupt department and you get bounced off, and then maybe your friend gets bounced off as well, and they give you a lot of nonsense. Don't be frustrated, because essentially there, where the people still give you nonsense, is exactly the place where you have to work, where you have to apply your work and your effort. If you went to like a place and they're like, oh yeah, okay, we'll record this, yes, we'll do our best, and then you reach a level and they say, sorry, we can't help you any further. Well, this is easy. This is not where we have to do the work. We have to recapture this bit here. So in a sense, don't get frustrated, let's say. You have to keep in mind that essentially where you feel resistance is where you have to go, point number one. Point number two, remember this famous quote by the old I think it was a Vietnam War veteran. He was a pilot, and he said, it's essentially you're above the target when you take the flak. So when they start shooting back, you're going in the right place. So essentially, keep that in mind as well. If your targeting intensifies, don't be scared off, because what it means is that people got really nervous and they want to stop you, and then oh, I'm on the right path. And yes, they will increase the targeting maybe a little bit, but they will, by the time you got going, they can't be too extreme, because then all hell will be raised. And I can tell you now, they are international efforts. So we are now in the end game, we are now wrapping this up. So don't be scared, push against the resistance. And then also keep in mind that you are dealing with the empire of bullshit. So whatever they're going to throw at you will be bullshit. Okay? So if you get frustrated about, oh, how stupid they are and how nonsensical this is and so on, and why they don't send you the papers and why they keep bending every single one of their processes, it is because you're dealing with the empire of bullshit. So they will come up with any old bullshit. Yes, because that's what they do professionally, you know, maintaining precisely that sort of empire. So don't be offended, don't be upset, just take it really calmly like a lawyer and say, okay, well, okay, thank you very much for that response. Now, you know, how about this one? And you keep going and you keep cycling it, and meanwhile, you don't get upset. Okay, and then there's one more thing. Hang on. Yes, there's also, actually this is very, very important. What's very important is, first of all, also that when you keep trying here, I would say, you know, build a protocol, pass it on, but this entire list, I would actually make it public. That's very important. Like I did, you know, ideally you make this entire, from the start you make it public. You make public, you know, what your hit list is, who you're going to target. You say, well, in my view, these people are responsible, these people should help me, you know, you publicly invite for help, support with that. Be careful, because the intelligence agencies are going to send stupid infiltrators who will just play the monkey, you know, play up, just to discredit you. So, you know, maybe at first you don't want to make it public totally. Maybe just, you know, make it public to the people you trust. Then, you know, study what the reaction is, retry with people you trust, build a protocol, pass it on, and maybe then make it public. And then say, you know, and then make everything public, the entire documentation, you know, black out your address, but then, you know, what district you live in is, or maybe, you know, even that. But if you're comfortable with that, at whatever level you're targeting people, you know, if you're comfortable with making it public, this is really valuable information, because then others can also refer to it. If you have success in recapturing somebody, people in captured states can say, yeah, but the other police officer already, you know, recognized this and stuff like that. But also, if you don't have success beyond a certain point of recapturing, make it public, because then essentially people from all around the world can start working on that point. And then we say, okay, now we are going to work until literally this person gives in as well. So make all your successes, but also all your frustrations public. And name names. In this case, name names. With public authorities, you can publicly name names and say, I think with my problem, this person should help me. So this is make it public. And does it still fit? Because then you emphasize that people have a personal responsibility, an actual personal responsibility to help you, and that's very important, because they have exactly that. So just a second, let me just check. Another good tip when you're approaching people and you're telling them about lots and lots of things that happened, if you can prove them, another argument, which is essentially scientifically totally valid as well, say you have break-ins and then really weird health complaints. What you can also say is that, you know, if your doctors try to fob you off with really rare diseases, actually in terms of scientific analysis, data analysis, it's also a valid argument to say, yes, but the compound probability, so the combined probability is just far too unlikely. It is statistically far too unlikely, if not impossible, that all these rare things would happen to me over and over. For example, being the victim of a break-in is pretty unlikely, but then being the victim of a break-in, suddenly this, you know, developing a really weird disease that only exists in the fringes of the medical book. Okay, well, maybe you have that as well, but then developing these things, or this disease, whilst you have a lot of break-ins, that's really rare. You know, especially if you've got more than one break-in, or you've got a break-in and then something happens to your car, like actual obvious tampering. and then you get, you know, gang stalking and people act weird. Or people sometimes do act weird just because. But if these things just amass, the more things they do to you, the more statistically unlikely it is to just happen by chance. And beyond a certain point, we can say, well, you know, we've got this class of people, and the totality of what happened to them is as unlikely as being involved in 2 plane crashes. You know, that's pretty unlikely. So, you know, there are some people who were involved in more than 1 plane crash. I think Ernest Hemingway, by the way, was one of them, as far as I know. So it does happen, but it's pretty unlikely. So with statistics, you can also say that, you know, it's impossible that all these things keep happening to you just by chance. There must be another mechanism. Okay, then actually 2 more points, and this goes